What is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here, and welcome to the Nebula Music Podcast. This is a show where I talk to some of today's coolest and most influential musicians with the goal of exploring their mindset. I'm very excited because today I have Griffin Goldsmith, drummer of the band Dawes, joining me for this interview. This was a very fun interview for me because we're both drummers. Griffin and I are both drummers, and we spent a long time just sort of geeking out about the things that most drummers geek out about. But beyond that, Griffin did an amazing job of explaining why Dawes has been such a successful band for over 10 years now, which is something that's rare. Believe it or not, it's rare to find a band that can stay together and be friends and do a lot of great things together for a decade. That's something that's very impressive. So if you're someone that's interested in having a band or a long-term music career, this is definitely the show for you. So let's not waste any more time. Let's dive right in. What is up, everybody? Eddie Barco here again, and thank you for tuning in. I always appreciate all you guys, all the listeners who have tuned in over the years and who just love to hear from really cool musicians and what they're doing and how they become successful and all that. And today is no exception. Today is definitely a very special episode because I've actually personally been looking forward to this. Whenever I get a chance to talk to a drummer, I get excited. I get a little giddy because, as you guys know, I'm a drummer. I like to hit things for a living, and my guest today also does that, and so we can relate on a lot of things. I have Mr. Griffin Goldsmith from the band Dawes joining me today. Griffin, how are you, man?
I'm good, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. Can I call you Griff? Is that like a thing? Do people call you Griff?
You can call me whatever you want.
Maybe I'll just stick to Griffin, man. Honestly, I appreciate you taking the time to speak to me today. We were just talking a little earlier about your backstory and just the band and how we're both essentially LA locals. We're both from the Valley and all that stuff. But I don't want to waste time talking about you. I always say this at the beginning of every episode. I want to make sure that you get the opportunity to talk about yourself. So Griffin, if you don't mind, I mean, maybe you can just give me a quick little intro to your backstory. I mean, we can talk about where you started music-wise, maybe how the band started sort of thing, and we'll sort of take it from there.
Sure. So, So my father is a musician, and my brother and I are both in Dawes. My brother's the lead singer and main songwriter.
That's right.
He's 5 years older than I am. And him and our good friend Blake Mills, who's a producer and songwriter himself and an amazing guitar player here in LA, they came up together. My brother met him when he was about, I think, 10 and Blake was 9, which would make me 5. So I kind of grew up, with idolizing them, and just I was in awe of what they were doing musically. And right around 13, I started to play drums. I was playing piano a little bit before that, but they had a band. My brother and Blake had a band, and there was always kind of a rotating drum chair. Like they never had a single person that stuck around. So I think I maybe intuited unconsciously that was where I should direct my time, just if I wanted to like be in the mix, which was all I wanted at that point. So I started playing drums around 13. I gave up baseball. I remember the day that I told my dad. I cried. He was stoked about it because he's an amazing musician. But yeah, I mean, I kind of just would play when I could after school. They went on tour right around that time. They had a band called Simon Dawes, and their first tours were like Maroon 5 and Incubus opening up. And
wow, dude, that's crazy.
When they started, I was just listening to records and playing along with the stuff that I was into, which at that point was, Mitch Mitchell's and John Bonham, I think is like the obvious. Yeah. And then I was super into like Stax Volt, Al Jackson, and obviously Motown, and then really into Steely Dan, and that left a strong. Yeah, I think that was probably my dad's doing, but that left a strong impression because those records have the best, in my opinion, the best session drummers at that time.
Yeah.
and they're all at their prime. You know, they're playing there.
Wasn't Vinny Colaiuta? I'm not sure if you know who that is, but wasn't Vinny Colaiuta on like a lot of those albums? Well, he's live.
He wasn't actually. I mean, he might have made the cut on some of it because they had so many people, and I'm not sure who played on a lot of it. But the stuff that I really was gravitating towards was Jeff Porcaro, Bernard Purdy, Hal Blaine, Jim Keltner, Jim Gordon. A lot of I mean.
For those of you non-drummers out there, these are basically legends that he's just listing. People that established the drumming game.
A ton of it.
Yeah.
So I mean, for me, it was what really was blowing me away at that time in my life was like the style, the fact, the high concept. You know, that there's a record called Katie Lied, and Jeff Porcaro I think was like 18 or 19 when he played on it.
Damn, he was young.
And I think he's on all but one track, and he keeps playing this one fill over and over again. And I thought that was so hip at that age.
Yeah,
he would, he'd come into it with that idea and apply it in such a tasteful way. But so, yeah, I mean, I started kind of playing that stuff, and then, in retrospect, I wish I had been equally as focused on chops, because I do think that there's a time at which it's easier to learn, and I think that those were the really formative years. And I still I have to practice all the time now, but I think back to when I was learning, Purdy licks, and it was so much easier to retain and kind of absorb it and use it in my vocabulary as a drummer back then. Whereas now I can spend, 100 hours practicing something, and like only in little ways will it make its way into my playing.
Do you think that's just because of age? Do you think that's because or do you think that's because you're working now and more busy and actually doing it professionally, if that makes sense?
I think it's both. I mean, I think a huge part of it's age. I mean, I was able to take so much more and just convert it to memory in a way that I can't necessarily now, or make it intuitive in a way that I struggle too much more now. But I think it's also playing, and like the fact that I'm probably over intellectualizing stuff occasionally. And I think it was Picasso that said that children are something like this, but children are naturally artists, and all we're doing is trying to get back to that. So I mean, I do think that there was this there was this objectiveness that I had that I don't necessarily have anymore now that I do this professionally and have been for almost 11 years.
Yeah. I think I'm going to try and add a little bit something to that, because I was sort of in the same predicament that you are. I mean, I still technically am. And I think as drummers and musicians, we sort of always are in that predicament where we're always coming across new concepts that we wished we sort of would have spent time earlier on. And I wonder, I don't know, I wonder if maybe your process to actually doing the groove thing, do you feel like that was not meant to be, but it obviously is helping with what you're doing? You know what I mean? Like, imagine if it was the opposite. Imagine if you would have grown up in like a gospel church and done nothing but gospel fills, right? And gospel chops. I mean, obviously your path would have been different, right? I'm not sure if you'd agree, but I think maybe focusing on the groove and the simple stuff when you started out playing drums, maybe that sort of created the path that you're currently on, if that makes sense.
100%. I mean, I've always thought that there are two kind of, philosophies when it comes to music in general. And I wish I had a better idea of this when I was actually learning, but I kind of I'm completely self-taught. I had some teachers, but I never went to school or anything. But yeah, I mean, I feel like you can see a player and know almost immediately whether they were learning by the book at that age, or like you just said, kind of self-directed, like getting into groove playing or more into the stuff that's seemingly these days less prevalent. It seems like there are a lot of amazing chop players, and a lot of them have impeccable taste as well. But it seems like the emphasis now seems to be much more on how much you can play, and not like the sonic aspect of drumming or taste, or like playing grooves. I mean, a lot of guys can do both really well, but I'm not articulating myself, but I totally agree with that. I feel like I came at it from that side of it, and in retrospect, I wish I'd had a little bit more of both. But I've spent all my free time pretty much trying to cultivate that thing and those chops, like trying to do what I see these jazz drummers do.
Yeah,
it's incredible. But then again, the grass is always greener. I mean, I've spoken to plenty of dudes who are like have all the chops and they just wish that they could do the other thing.
Yeah. So what a great point. And this is something I mentioned a lot, and I know that my listeners are tired of hearing it, but the truth is this is something I sort of went through because I come from a Latin jazz background growing up playing, especially in like Hispanic churches and that sort of thing. And then when I finally transitioned into the professional world, I started playing with a singer-songwriter. And I remember the very first couple rehearsals where, the band sounded great, and I was, dropping stuff left and right. And by dropping stuff, I mean like playing licks and stuff. And the singer would just turn to me and just be like, "Hey, dude, that sounds great. Can you like just play just a boop, boop, ka, boop, boop, ka without so many ghost notes?" And it was funny for me the first couple of days, but I got the point relatively quickly. And I noticed it when we played live the first couple times, what a difference that made for me to sort of lay back. And again, I know this is something that drummers hear a lot, but I like to sort of nail it in the coffin when I get a guest like you who understands that the simplicity side of it, when you play with a band and when you play with songwriters and stuff that it's about more than just drumming, the simplicity and the groove, to me, in my opinion, it's something that it takes a long time to learn how to do it right. You know what I mean? That's why, to me, I'm sort of fascinated that you started off that route because I felt like you were fortunate,
Definitely very fortunate, and I think that I attribute all of it to the fact that I grew up with really incredible songwriters, and Blake and my brother being two of them. But it never occurred to me that there was another way. It was always just like play the song. That's what you do. My dad is an amazing songwriter as well, and we would gig out with him when we were kids, and whatever, New Year's Eve gigs or weddings. And it was always the emphasis. It was never anything but that. And I only have realized really in the last couple of years that that needs to be, I guess, explained to people. I mean, it seems like I can't say this with certainty because I've never been to school for drumming, but it seems like there's a lack of emphasis there in schools. There's not an emphasis on how to play a song or what to listen to or how to be sympathetic, or how to read the room. I mean, half of the gig, if you're in a session, is being able to be enjoyable to be around and also just contribute. And it could, just contribute in terms of vibe, if that's all it is, or it can contribute in a way that's appropriate. And I feel like it's a hard thing to teach, and I'm not sure I could teach it, but I do think that I'm very fortunate in that I came up with these people that were writing incredible songs. That's always the emphasis. I mean, you should always be listening to what the person that's singing is saying, because at the end of the day, songs rule the world. That's what people always. I mean, that's a good song is a good song despite who's playing on it. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I mean, the song can stand on its own. Yeah.
You mentioned this whole thing about reading the room, and it's interesting because you're right. I think when it comes to the whole groove aspect, especially performing live, in my opinion, is something that you have to learn by doing. And for you, your band, from my understanding and from all the stuff that I've watched and listened to, you guys are very song oriented, and you definitely have your moments where you groove a lot, but there's a lot of emphasis in what you guys talk about, which is what you were saying. As the drummer, has there been times, which I imagine the answer is yes, but obviously I want to elaborate a little bit. Have there been times where you've played a room where you've been playing in front of a whole bunch of people and you rehearsed it a certain way and it just didn't feel right, and maybe last minute you decided to play it somewhat differently and it made everything different or better? Has that ever happened to you while you guys are on tour?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that the arrangements change nightly. I mean, to a certain extent, the sounds and the way we're playing, dynamic in which we're playing is very much contingent on what kind of room we're in.
Yeah.
I especially feel that at festivals, because that's
yeah.
I'm sure you've played festivals, but it's a completely different thing trying to reach however many thousand people outside. You want to play to the back of the room, and in that case, you have to simplify to the point where people, thousands of yards away from you are it's translating to them.
Yeah.
It's much broader strokes. I feel like that maybe the slick stuff that I might try to intersperse here and there I'm not gonna get away with it if I'm not in a theater.
Right. And that actually totally makes sense to me. Now, here's what I'm curious about. Since your band is, in my opinion, you can feel free to disagree with me, very song driven. You as the drummer, or as Griffin, or as one of the brothers, I'm curious how much, are you involved a lot with the songwriting process? Especially because, you're the drummer. And so there's definitely stories where the drummer has a lot to do with the songwriting process. But in my experience, and in general, I would argue that a lot of bands, for the most part, it's not the drummer that has a hand in the songwriting. They sort of come in after the song has been written. So I'm curious for you, do you have a part in writing the songs? And if not, or maybe yes, how do you sort of go about creating the drum parts or the groove for the songs that you guys are making?
That's an interesting question. I mean, our band is peculiar in that we have one songwriter. My brother writes everything, and pretty much always the process is he writes a song, he sends it to us, at which point we'll make suggestions, lyrical or arrangemental or chordal if it calls for it, or if any of us think it calls for it, and then we get into a room and arrange it together. So yeah, I mean, I'd say that I have much more of a hand in arranging the stuff than I do writing it. I mean, I pretty much don't write any of it. There's a song in this new batch which we've yet to record that I wrote the music to, and my brother took it and ran with it. But yeah, I mean, it depends. There's certain things that need to be reworked in order to kind of, differentiate. I mean, it's really easy to sometimes the obvious thing is just a little bit overwrought, whether it's boom ka, or 6/8 or whatever. So sometimes it's okay, that's try to pick out, you boil down the song to the simplest version. So if it's written on guitar, I want to hear him play it with the guitar and sing it. And sometimes there's a riff to latch onto or a vocal thing, and kind of like to let that dictate where the groove
is going,
which direction the groove, what direction it's headed in. There's a song on the last record called Passwords, and Taylor had this cool guitar riff, and it kind of, I heard it and I was like, that sounds like it wants to be almost played like a drum machine, like a linear part. So I actually had a voice memo of some linear part that I had recorded on an MPC that I had sequenced on my MPC, and then I just started playing it on the drums and changed a couple of the sound sources, and it was one of my favorite songs on the record. But yeah, I mean, it's just case to case. I mean, our band, I feel like it's the fact that we have a singular songwriter, and we kind of all know our place, and we've all very much have strengths.
Yeah.
When we know, and okay, this is what he's good at, or this is what he's good at. I think that's why we've been able to
stay a band for a while, dude.
Yeah.
Because you've been a band for a decade almost.
Yeah. So over a decade at this point. And I mean, it's not even stay a band. It's so easy. It's that we get along so well. So yeah, I mean, just to be able to be around for 10 years is a feat, but the fact that we still love each other and just we hang out all the time when we're not on tour, which is great,
man. That's the way it should be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, totally.
But it's more rare than not.
I take it for granted.
It's more rare. I mean, I think a lot of people when they see their favorite bands play, and again, this isn't the case for everybody, but I know plenty of bands where that's not the case, where it's like you're on tour, everyone's cool with each other, and once they're home, they're home. And it's not that everybody hates each other. It's more of like, they all just kind of go do their own thing. But it seems like you guys are, dare I say it, more of a family, which is what you want,
Absolutely. I mean, I took it for granted for a long time. And then I've been around bands, and as I'm sure we all have, where you could tell that they don't like each other. And I think, my brother's amazing at communicating, and he's the best dude in the world. So anytime there's ever been anything bubbling, he's the first one to be like, all right, guys, let's sit down and talk about it. I mean, you can sense that. I feel like people can sense it when they listen to the music, like, that we're having fun, that we're all really enjoying playing with each other. And I can sense when bands aren't.
Yeah, it's obvious.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude. And here's what I'm curious about, because again, I think the dynamic in your band and the way that you're describing it to me sounds amazing, and it sounds like a dream scenario. I definitely experienced something like that myself in the past. And what I'm curious about is, for me, when I first joined the songwriter that I played with for a couple of years, it was this instant. I don't want to say instant, but because I had to change a lot from a music standpoint. My musicianship had to grow, and then everything was great. But for me, my respect from being a drummer's drummer to being a band's drummer, it changed very fast. Like, once I met the singer-songwriter, I gained a respect, and I learned my role, and I stepped back from being a flashy drummer to a pocket drummer, I guess you can call it. And so for you guys, since you guys have been a band for such a long time, I'm curious, like, you said that you guys all sort of know what your roles are and play to your strengths. Was that always the case, or did you guys have to grow into that?
I mean, there've been speed bumps, and I think only in the last 4 years since Lee joined has it been really obvious that this is the lineup forever, and that,
that's good.
I don't mean that disparagingly. The other musicians that were with us before are amazing, but for whatever reason, it just wasn't the thing. And yeah, I think it's taken time to realize that that's where we're at, not to get on other people's ass about, like, play this. Like, I think we've done enough as a band to realize that it's not worth it. And also that stuff's going to change, and that we're all, we all truly feed off one another. So we're lucky. I think it's developed, but I don't ever think it wasn't like there wasn't like a concerted effort to get there. It kind of just happened naturally. Which is awesome.
It's one of those dream scenarios, like I said, when everything just sort of falls into place. You know what I mean? Which is honestly, like, it's what you want in a band. And I love that.
And I think part of it is just growing up. I think, like, when we started touring, I was 17 or 18. I just turned 18, maybe.
Straight out of high school,
and
huh?
I think, like, so when I was a dick for a couple of years in the middle there.
17 and touring, you're a drummer. Come on.
I was having the time of my life, but I was also like, I wasn't the adult that I am now. So there were moments where I can only imagine that I just wasn't communicating well, and I wasn't able to actually say what I was feeling. Whereas now, like, it's not, it's not a problem. But I think it was just less like trusting each other musically, more like learning how to love each other unconditionally. And also, like, for me, and I think this goes for all of us, it was just learning how to be my best version, be the best version of myself, so that I'm easy to be around. I'm sure you've been on tour quite a bit, and it's like that. The way that you are acting is very, very. It permeates, like, you got to be in a good mood, because you're impressing your attitude upon everybody else on that bus, and it's, everybody gets in their moods, but it's not fair to just sulk around, especially when we play music for a living. It's the best job in the world.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I think more than anything, it was just like kind of, at least for me, coming of age and growing into my manhood as I was a kid. I was so different than I am today when I started touring.
So let me ask you this then. Then I think we touched on this a little earlier in a different way. But I tend to find that this is the case for a lot of drummers, specifically for drummers. Since you feel like obviously you've matured, I feel like we all have matured when we're on the show. Has your playing matured with you?
I think, yeah, every day I feel like I'm a more mature player, more measured, and I feel like the way you walk and the way you talk is the way you play. So I mean, if it's every learning experience, whether it's like I don't know, dealing with like getting a parking ticket and like the stress that comes with that, or like reading a book that changes the way you think and live. Those experiences, I think, directly influence the way that you play. And so, yeah, I mean, I think I'm still maturing as a drummer, and I think every day I'm just more comfortable behind a kit. And also, like, I've come to learn how ephemeral a lot of this stuff is, how quickly it passes away. And, you know, instead of just hanging everything on like this one session or this one record or this one tour, I've learned to ease up and realize like there's been a lot of tours and a lot of records and a lot of sessions, and you know, you gotta make mistakes to learn from them. I mean, certainly.
So in one way is a secret to your success and your band's success? Do you feel like part of it is that you've approached it in that manner that you were just describing, the way that you sort of understand that all of it can go away, so you might as well just sort of ease up? Is that something that you guys have always tried to do? You know, like we talked about, you had some growing to do at the beginning, but I wonder if maybe that's why your band has continued to succeed for so long, is the fact that, and I don't want to say it this way, okay, this is not at all what I mean, but I personally, myself included, I've done this before. I find that a lot of musicians care a little too much about the details about a lot of things. You know what I mean? And again, I'm not trying to get so obsessed about that, but what you were describing to me is that you were more laid back about it. And that's my attitude that I'm getting about you, because you seem very relaxed, very sort of, you know, you seem to get life, if that makes sense. And I don't know how else to put it, because honestly, I interview so many musicians, and there's some out there that are killing it. They're hustlers. There's some that are more chill, but to you, I sort of see that longevity, you know, where like you guys are just doing your thing. It's succeeding, and it will always succeed. And I wonder if it's because you're sort of approaching it day by day, if that makes sense. I'm not sure if I'm making sense, but
yeah, you're totally making sense. And I do think that that's part of it. I mean, I think it's a lot of things that have contributed to this success that we've had as a band, but one of them, certainly, maybe the most important one, is realizing relatively early on that we're not necessarily the, you know, quote unquote cool band, and that it's not about like crafting this aesthetic, and that, you know, every band, I mean, I've always kind of said, like, you know, if you have 100,000 people that are hating you online, that are tweeting at you and or whatever, DMing you and just, you know, spitting hatred your way, then you're doing well. I mean,
yeah.
I think it's like the bigger you get, the more, obviously everybody wants to grow their thing.
Of course.
That's always been the intent for us, but it became evident as we started to get a little bit bigger as a band that like there are going to be people out there that just hate the music, and that's fine. I think I've always been so confident in what we do as a band and what we have as a band that I don't care what people think. I mean, if people don't like the music, I get it, to each their own, but I do think that, like, I think that our power is something that nobody can take away from us, no matter what the critique is, no matter what the review says. Doesn't, like, I have confidence in what we do and in my brother's songs, and I think to maybe sometimes too much, because, you know, there'll be opportunities that have come our way where everybody else in the band is like, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to, you know, do that control guard on that tour because of whatever reason. And my mentality has always been like, I don't care. Like, if every day that I'm getting paid, every day that I'm getting paid to play music, to me is incredible.
It's a win.
It's a win forever. I'm living the best possible life that I could be living. This is all I ever wanted when I started at 17 was just to go on tour. So to be able to, you know, have a day off at home and just, if my job for the day is to like play drums, it still blows my mind. So I think I think my point is I think I could be a little bit less laid back and more worried about like crafting the aesthetic, because I'm really just like, we're great at what we do. I know I'm not tooting our own horn, but
no, you got to give credit where credit's due,
I think
man.
we're good at it. And it's like, whether or not you like it's one thing, but I don't think any one single tour or whatever commercial or anything or sync is ever going to take away what we do. I mean, it's never going to make it. It's never going to lessen it.
Yeah, and I love what you're saying, because it's so true. I think as long as you have confidence in what you're doing, and let's face it, the fact that you can get paid to do anything that you like these days is incredible. I mean, it's the competition is so high, and I know that it's really popular right now in our culture to sort of idolize. And this is something I've talked about before, and I don't want to like rant about this, but I love what you're saying, and I want to sort of expand on it a little bit, because I know I have tons of listeners that are really trying their best to make a name for themselves. And for me, what has helped me in the past, because I'm still growing, man. I'm not nowhere near where I want to be. I'm getting there.
I think if either of us were where we want to be, it would be a problem. I mean,
yeah.
Anytime, I hope that I never get to a place where I'm satisfied with who I am as a musician.
Thank you for saying that. Yes, and you're right. To expand on that, I think the success that you guys have gained, and that a lot of musicians have gained, I think is attributed to self-discovery and understanding who you are as a person. Because I think, especially in our culture today, and you can feel free to disagree or agree with me, I think all of us sort of spend too much time obsessing over what other people are doing. And I'm not even saying like we all obsess over the biggest bands like Metallica or Drake or whatever, but I think honestly, we're constantly seeing all these videos of people attaining great successes that we don't take time to see what we're good at, what we've achieved. And you were sitting there, honest to God, telling me what you know you're good at. And I personally think that that's a rarity nowadays. And maybe that is part of why you're so successful, is because you know you want to grow, you know where you want to go, but you also know what you're good at, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to be discerning to that point. I mean, I think people do, I think anytime, it's important to obsess about the stuff that you like, but never try to recreate it. I mean,
yeah.
As long as you're doing something that you think is quality, then you're good. I mean, I think it's important to know also your limits. I mean, like not anybody is capable of playing like Vinnie Colaiuta, but everybody is capable of being tasteful. I mean, everybody's capable of honing their taste, of listening to music and and understanding it in its terms and applying it how they will. I think that's at least the game I play, because I've never had the chops that I mean, you can go on YouTube and find literally 1,000 people that are playing circles around every single person, and it's like it's overwhelming. And as long as you know, I think where you're trying to go, and it's not a ridiculous expectation, I think you're winning. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important to just to be discerning and not. I've noticed in myself, like I have kind of as a reaction to people being obsessed with trying to recreate, like you said, these idols, that these people that they idolize, or this music that is successful. I think I've been a little bit reactionary and kind of felt like, well, everything is homogenized now, and like I don't like that. But I think ultimately that attitude is detrimental. I think the only person that's missing out when they listen to Drake's new record Scorpion and says like, I hate this, is that person. I mean, it doesn't have to be for you, but I do think that it's important to understand why that record is such a big deal. I mean, I don't spend my time listening to stuff that I don't like, but I try to, when I hear it, be open-minded and think like, well, a ton of people like this. Why is that?
Yeah. So important to ask those questions too. And I'm glad you said that. I honestly was not expecting you to say that. And I'm really happy that you would say something like that, because I personally think that musicians, myself included, okay, I always include myself and I'm always growing, but the idea is I want to make sure that a lot of musicians try and expand their horizons and understand why certain things work. I mean, I'll give you a great example. I have a really good friend of mine who he has his own music licensing company, right? And like we were talking about Sync a little bit earlier. And this guy, his job is essentially to license commercials and movies. So he listens to tons of music every day. Now, this guy's a phenomenal guitarist, one of the best metal guitarists I've ever met in my life. And this guy can talk to you for hours about metal music. But what's funny is that whenever we grab coffee, he tells me, you know, he's not a fan of hip hop, but he understands what makes a great hip hop song. And that, when he talked to me about that and he explained to me the reasons why, it just blew me away because he explained it to me in a way that I've never thought of it before. And I sat there thinking, like, I need to do that more often. Like, why don't I just sit there? And I don't listen to metal music, but why don't I sit there and understand what makes a great metal song? Or like you were saying, why is the new Drake album great? Like, you don't have to be a fan, but understanding why certain artists work, why their endeavors are succeeding might help your career, if that makes
100%.
sense.
And I mean, especially if you get a little bit further into like the technical aspect of actually being a drummer. I mean, or whatever instrument you play, it's like there's so much there. It's just a well of knowledge to take from. I mean, I don't listen to metal music either, but those guys are
incredible.
Pretty much, yeah. It's like they could be playing jazz. I mean, they're incredible. It's just what you're into. I mean, I think for somebody that's into metal music, it's like they should be just trying to learn what those people are doing. I mean, it's amazing. It's its own thing, and I get it. I totally understand it. But yeah, I mean, I can't necessarily like get into it, and I've tried so many times. But yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. It's like it's just important. It's important to know why it's good on its own terms, or whether it's good on its own terms.
Yeah, and you know what? That makes me curious because I know that you guys play a lot of like folk music, and part of me is interested because, you know, I'm from LA and you're from LA essentially, or from the Valley, LA area, and I listen to your music and I love how singer-songwriter driven it is and very folk-ish. But I'm not a huge expert in the folk music genre. I know I've been in the pop scene for a lot of years, and I know that LA kind of has a bit of a mixture of music here. It's a hub for musicians. But you were saying how you were confident in your music, and to me, personally, without having any knowledge, I would argue that it would be hard for a folk band to make it out of LA. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I often think about if we were starting now. I mean, it would be so much harder than it was 10 years ago. But ultimately, I mean, it's funny. People call our music folk or Americana or singer-songwriter.
Americana.
I think you have to see a live show in order to get that, which is something that we struggle with forever. I mean, as long as we've been a band, people have been in our shows and been like, you know, I like your records, but I love your live show. Like, I had no idea it was going to be like that. I've always kind of thought of it like that. Anyway, I mean, I think at the end of the day, like I said earlier, like the good songs prevail. And if my brother didn't write good songs, I don't think that we would still be a band.
When did you realize that your brother wrote good songs? Was it at a live show when everybody was singing back, or did you just always know?
I'm so biased because it was this, you know, I was raised on it.
Yeah.
He's my older brother.
He's your brother.
Like, I was growing up, and he was the person that I just wanted to be most like. So I always thought he was writing good songs. I mean, now that when I listen back to the songs that his first band was recording, they're hilarious and they're not good, but. But I think it really hit me when we were making our first record, North Hills. We were kids, and my brother was in between bands. That band had broken up, and then I moved into the house like the day I graduated high school, and we were jamming, and me and him both had jobs from 10 to 2 every day. It was the most mellow job ever.
What'd you guys do?
We were working at my mom's company. She was I think the VP of a First American Home Warranty, which happens to be around the corner from where we were living.
Is that like insurance or something?
Yeah, it's home insurance. So we were doing mindless work. We were just entering numbers into a computer. But me being this ungrateful little kid, I was like, this is the worst thing ever. I don't want to be doing this. So, I mean, like I said, it was 10 to 2. It was like nothing. And I would still, both of us were so exhausted at the end of every day. And he wrote a song. We had recorded our record, And then he wrote this song in a day called When My Time Comes, which ended up being it's been our most successful tune. And I think when I heard that or maybe read the lyrics, I was like, wow, this is, he was really channeling something at that point. I mean, you can tell that he was just so full of this angst and like confusion. And I think he was really able to just, take that and put it into song, which is not an easy thing to do. It's certainly something I've never been able to do. So I think at that point I realized, like, wow, this is for real. This dude is writing some incredible stuff.
How old were you guys, by the way, when that happened?
I was probably 17 when he wrote that tune. So he was like 22.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, we played it every night since. So I think, and I mean, he continues to get better too, which is really what blows my mind.
That's so cool, man. I wanted to ask that because, as family, as siblings, we all have, I think most of us do have siblings, or at least I'm hoping so. For me, myself, I know that sometimes we can be biased, with people that we love. We can just like, yeah, of course my sister is the best in the world at doing this per thing, because you love your family. And I love how you had such confidence and how you were such a big fan of your brother's writing, because I think that's something, honestly, that took some discernment from you. You know what I mean? Like, you obviously he was good, right? But you knew that he was good beyond just being your brother. And
I mean, I thought that. I mean, I still am aware of the fact that I drank the Kool-Aid a long time ago. So like, I mean, it's kind of impossible to be totally objective about your band. Like, I'm so close to it. I'm probably the worst person to ask, honestly, about, anything regarding like Dawes or my brother, just because, I mean, anytime we're asked, like, what's your favorite record while we're in the studio, it's like, well, it's the one that we're making. I mean, this is that's always the answer. It's never like,
that's the one we made 10 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're always closest to like what's happening here and now. So every song he writes, I'm like, this is the best one. This one's getting better. Like, these records are just getting stronger and stronger. And I mean, I think I'm probably like not at all objective. I mean, I try to be, but not. I don't pretend to be.
I love that. And I know that you're being honest about it, because I dig your vibe, and you have a very honest vibe. So that obviously means that the record that you guys just worked on or currently working on is your favorite record, essentially.
I mean, I think the record that's out now is my favorite record, and I love playing those songs every
Passwords,
night.
right? It's called Passwords?
That's our 6th studio album. We're not like in the studio working on anything right now, but we're all bouncing tunes off one another and also like arranging stuff when we have time at a sound check so it's kind of always a work in progress. Yeah.
Since you're not the songwriter specifically, but I'm curious, do you by any chance know or ever talk about with your brother like what the songs mean whenever he writes something?
Yeah, I pretty much know what they all mean. I mean, I think I could even tell you like which female it's about, if it is about one, or like there's certain references that nobody is privy to except for me, probably, and the other dudes in the band.
So passwords. So what does that mean, if I can ask you?
You mean, what's the significance of the title?
Yeah, or like even just like the album in general, like if there's maybe like a vibe or a sort of message that is important to you guys that, your fan, that you want your fans to sort of get out of that when they listen to it.
I mean, I don't know if there's any single message. I mean, this is the first record in which my brother's been overtly political. I mean, it's kind of impossible not to be right now. But I mean, it's an album about him getting married. He just got married a couple weeks ago, and it was just, I think, the journey from the fact that from the point of origin and the when we were kids writing these songs on North Hills, or when he was writing these songs and we were touring, to now where he's a married man, and the fact that his priorities have completely shifted. But the significance of the title is that something as simple as a password, a 9-digit code that you put into your computer every day is potentially like swinging elections, or I mean, it's not about the election, but the point is like this seemingly arbitrary word or number is so significant. These little things actually like have incredible consequences if misused, or I mean, it's just about kind of. I mean, there's a lyric in the song "My Greatest Invention," in which he says, "You can turn a second inside out and end up with an eternity." And I feel like that kind of says it all. It's like you can. There's so much in every single aspect of our life, and every little thing that we touch, and every in every password, in every moment. Like there's so much to unpack, and I think it's important to realize that like sometimes these seemingly smaller or innocuous moments are actually much more consequential than we realize.
Yeah, and they all add up to specific, consequences, essentially. All these little things that we don't really even think about can totally change things. I'm curious, man, and I'm glad you bring this up. And maybe we're not comfortable to talk about it. But, I mostly played for one guy, but I've also played from various other bands, too, in my career. And I know from an artist standpoint, it can be hard to stand for specific things. And obviously, because your brother and you guys are shifting in your life, I think personally your songs are going to shift with you. Do you, as a drummer and maybe as a band, and I'm not sure if you can speak for the band, but I'm curious for you, do you feel comfortable as a band to sort of, I'm not going to say take sides or anything, but, comfortable enough so that your songs can sort of speak truths about what's happening without outrightly saying, certain things, obviously. But I think what you were saying with, your song, your current album is political. I don't see a lot of artists doing that nowadays. You know what I mean? Yes, and I think it's something that was lost in the times, because you definitely would see that a lot more, even in the 90s. You know what I mean? But
it's
I think it's not,
because as soon as you get political, or at least specifically political, you date yourself in the same way that you would if you we're talking about like fucking Kanye West or something. It's like as soon as you reference like a cultural phenomenon of today, you're kind of tied into that forever. So I mean, to your question, I do feel comfortable speaking for everybody. In so much as I know where everybody stands politically. I mean, you know how it is in Los Angeles. We're the most progressive state in the country by far.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
it's hard, and I'm very happy about that. And we live in a bubble. I mean, I know that like it's easy to get like bogged down, and it's easy to get like overrun with this like identity politics game and kind of fall victim without knowing you fall victim. Or it's hard to even have these conversations without identifying with something. And I mean, I think the message is less like we feel this way, and more, why can't we have that conversation without speaking past each other? Why can't we hear each other and agree to disagree, maybe, or at least get to a place where we understand what we're saying, and if we are disagreeing, it's based on an actual difference of opinion rather than a misconstrual of facts.
Yeah, I agree, and honestly, I feel like music for decades, I mean, just in general, music has always been a great way to encourage everyone to sort of have that conversation. You know what I mean? Because I do feel like, again, we can go around in circles for days when it comes to this topic. But I do think it's something that's important to do now more than ever. Not necessarily, like you were saying, not necessarily be so outright. I mean, it depends on what you want to be as an artist. But I think what you're doing, for example, is very important. Encouraging people to have that conversation and not necessarily try and find the answer, but agree to disagree. And acknowledge that everyone has that difference, and that's okay. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I feel like, sadly, I mean, I agree. I do think it's always an important time to play music, even if it's just to offer somebody, a fun night out in the midst of like all this mayhem that we're experiencing every day. But I do think that in a weird way, even music has kind of fallen victim to this fake news phenomenon, like the idea that like we're disagreeing and therefore there's just no answer. It's like, oh, well, you feel that way, I feel this way, so I guess like we just don't know. And it's like that doesn't, just because two people are disagreeing about something doesn't mean that there isn't actually a definitive answer.
I agree. And we've disagreed for centuries. Humans disagree all the time.
Yeah, totally. And it's actually like the healthiest thing we can do as long as it's constructive. And I feel like music has fallen into this trap in that like I've had conversations with people where it's like, well, I like this artist and you don't. So I guess that just means that like she's great or he's great to me and not to you. And I can't sleep at night if the rubric by which we judge music or the quality of music is as simple as like I like it or I don't. Like I can't swallow that. I can't just believe like, okay, you like this music and I don't, so therefore it's good to you, it's bad to me. I do think that there is a rubric, I do think there's like there are boxes that need to be checked in order for something to actually stand up as quality to me. I don't pretend to know all of what they are, but I do think that people have gotten so far away from like having to, needing their music to actually, check those boxes, to actually hit those marks. I think like a lot of what people want now is passive listening. And I think that it's not challenging. And I think it's why a lot of music, and this is my opinion, and I love all music, like we spoke about. But I do think it's why a lot of the music, especially like top 40, sounds really similar to me these days. I mean, and there's not, I don't know, it's not as much substance there, and I think it's because people care less and less about whether or not it's actually substantive.
Yeah. What do you think is the solution to that, if I can ask? Obviously, I'm not asking you to solve a decades-long problem in like a minute, but I'm just curious, like as the drummer for Dawes, and just you as a drummer, and obviously me respecting your opinion, like, do you think the solution to sort of music lacking substance? Because I agree. I do think a lot of music nowadays, not all music, there's tons of good music coming out all the time, but a lot of the stuff that gets the mainstream attention, most of it, not all of it, but most of it does lack substance compared to what it used to be. Do you think the solution is sort of, as a band, like you guys are doing, sort of encouraging people to have those conversations and encouraging people to sort of have substance in their music?
I don't think that the solution is like we need more bands that do what we do. I mean, we're not even playing that ball game. We're so far from what's happening in pop culture, at least in terms of like musically, it couldn't be more different. But I do think it's just, I don't know. I mean, I really have no idea what the answer is. I think people should demand more of their art. I mean, I don't want to get specific about, I mean, honestly, I couldn't even name a lot of the shit that I hear on the radio, but I mean, some of it, it's just like, wow, I've heard this thing like 50 times and in exactly the same, I can't differentiate between this number one or that number one. And I don't, and also the lyrics are like pretty much all the same and they're just not challenging. Like I said, it's like, it's not demanding anything of the listener. I think that the solution, and I don't know how to go about doing this, is that the listener needs to demand more. I mean, I think that like the fact that the like radio is what it is, or not even radio, Spotify streams or whatever, like the fact that the pop stars are who they are reflects what we want. I think it's not a problem with pop so much as it is the consumer. I mean, as long as we continue to consume it or want it, then it's going to continue to be ubiquitous. I think it's a matter of people wanting to hear somebody say something or listen to music that's maybe a little bit more challenging. I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's not, I like a lot of that pop too. Like I said, I can listen to it and it's like, wow, this is a great pop song.
Yeah. I listen to top 40 radio every day, man. I love it.
Yeah. Like I like that stuff. And I understand why it's big. The one thing that this is just a side note, the one thing that's completely eluded me and has made me feel really old is mumble rap, but so be it. I listen to that shit too, but like, I just don't, I don't understand. I don't understand why it's such a big deal, but like pop music, it's very easy to hear those hooks and be like, wow, okay, this is undeniable.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think, yeah, it's like, man, we're going around in circles at this point, but like, it's so,
it's okay.
It's so similar.
It's
so
okay.
similar.
Yeah. And I agree with you. And you know what? I've had so many different conversations with people about this specific topic, about pop music. I've had plenty of people that love it, plenty of musicians that hate it, plenty of musicians that are indifferent towards it. And that's okay. And that's the conversation I like to have, because I personally think, my own opinion, I think everyone, they're going to love what they love. And I think nowadays, specifically, personally, I think pop music sort of speaks to what society is going through, where a lot of people are our age, or maybe even younger than we are, have a hard time sort of deciding things. And therefore, I mean, this is something that it could take forever to talk about. Honestly, I'm not even sure if I want to get into it. But I think, personally, like, I think maybe the reason you guys have a more, I don't want to say devout, but do you feel like maybe that means that you guys will have a much more dedicated fan base, people that actually want that substance, or people that are looking for the substance that your band provides? Do you feel like maybe that's a benefit of the industry being this way?
For sure. I mean, I think that our fans come to see our band not because it's not pop music, but because they want to hear what my brother's saying. They want to see what a band looks like. They want to hear what it sounds like when four dudes who have been playing together for this long play together, because that's not something that you can get that often. I mean, with all of its warts too, it's not like when you come to a Dawes show, it's this like perfect presentation. I mean, it has its scars, and I think that's what people are attracted to.
I love that. It has its scars. Yeah, I love that. I love that metaphor, man.
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I think that the further in this direction pop music goes, the larger the market is for songwriters or for good songs, for people that want like an alternative. I mean,
because that's something I would totally argue that, yes, I think, like, for example, you were saying mumble rap and like trap music. I think obviously those people get millions and millions of listens and followers. And I had a couple artists just on the show that they're in that world and they love it. And I love that they're into it. But I think you guys also, that also means that leaves a gap for people that need or are looking for what you provide. You know what I mean?
For sure. And I think at the end of the day, like, if you're trying to, be the next Ed Sheeran, then you're kind of chasing something that's, I guess, nebulous. Like, it's hard to put your finger on the zeitgeist. I think what we do, it's like, it's certainly not that, and we're never going to have the success that somebody like that has seemingly overnight. But I do think that, like, we have a very obvious, way of making this music. Like, it's a very, like, substratum. There's something to always go back to.
Yeah.
It's the way we do things. We write the songs, we play them like a band, and obviously we're always trying to innovate in our way as much as we can. But I don't think when it's scary. I would imagine being in that situation, and I've been around a lot of bands that are like this, where they come out the gates and they have this giant song, and it's scary, man. I can't imagine being in that position. I remember when we toured with Bob Dylan some years ago, and his crew was so cool.
Dude, that must have been crazy, man. That must have been awesome.
It was incredible, yeah. And the last day of tour, his stage manager said, like, if I have one piece of advice, it's never have a hit. And I thought that was interesting, and he's totally right. I mean, not that we ever risked having a hit, but I do think, like, it's true. It's like, as soon as you reach those heights, you have to deliver, or else it's a downward slope. I mean, it's a downward trajectory, and that's scary. I mean, the good thing about Dawes is that, like, we've never been a giant band, but every tour, it's the next step, and it always is exciting, because it's always like, okay, things are still getting bigger, more people are coming, and like, we feel like we're better.
Yeah.
And it just seemed, and I've never been in that situation, but I would imagine that it's tough to, I mean, first of all, it seems insanely hard to maintain that. But even if you do, it's like, there's an expiration date, especially if your music isn't based on songs, it's based on being
or trying to catch a fad.
Yeah, exactly. Like being like being popular. I mean,
fads have expiration dates, man. And
totally.
I love that you're saying that because, man, I'm glad that we're talking about what we're talking about. I love it because I love engaging conversations like this. And the truth is, that advice that you received, honestly, I think it's worth $1 million because it's true. I think we're all, like we were talking about earlier, we all have a vision of where we want to be, and we'll never stop trying to attain it. I know I definitely dream big and I go after everything just like you guys do. But I think there's a sort of magic that you lose when you're an instant success. You know what I mean? And again, it depends on the person. There's people out there that have like thrived on that can deliver hit after hit after hit after hit. But I personally think it's like you were saying, once you're up there, once you're a hit, or once your company succeeds, or once you do something that everyone's eye is on, all of a sudden you're like not allowed to fail. You know what I mean? Like it's like people expect the gold from you. And I think most of us, I'll include myself in there, I think I would crash and burn if tomorrow all of a sudden I was handed this just like instant fame. I don't know what I would do with it. I think it takes maturity and it takes experience to be able to handle that kind of success. If that makes sense.
It takes an alien. I mean, like the examples of like the Ed Sheerans or the Ariana Grandes or the Michael Jacksons and the Bruce Springsteens. These people that have stayed on top, they're not normal people. I mean, this is clearly like an aberration. So yeah, I mean, it takes something that most people, like 99.99% of everybody ever doesn't have.
Yeah.
And I mean, and it's never, I mean, like you said, we dream big and we do what we can. But I'm not, it's important not to be,
know yourself. It's important to know yourself.
Yeah, it's like you can't like I listened to the podcast that you did with I want to say JP.
Yeah, JP Bouvet.
Yeah, and he had it right where he's like, you can like do what you do, and then there's if you do it well, there's a chance that you might end up as one of these people.
Yeah,
but that's really it. I mean, like there are people out there that are writing pop songs that are just as poppy as like the number one on the radio right now. But the difference being one person's insanely lucky and was given the shot.
Yeah. There's so many variables that play into success. And I think the takeaway from a lot of this, which I think you've done a great job of explaining, is that it all comes down to what's important to you, who you are, and believing in what you've got. Because the truth is, I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer because that's not what I try to do. I try to inspire everybody to shoot for the stars. But I think what's most important out of anything, if there's anything that anyone can learn how to do, is to figure themselves out and figure out what you're good at and what's important to you. Because yes, we can all look at, like we were saying earlier, we can all look at Drake and fantasize about having that life. But the truth is, most of us would probably hate that life and crash and burn if given the opportunity to live that life. Like you were saying, it takes a certain kind of person to live that rock star lifestyle. So I personally think what's beneficial to people and what something like you're doing is always constantly trying to improve who you are and being realistic, but also just understanding what you're proud of, what makes you. And if you're always betting on yourself, betting on your band, or like you bet it on your brother's songs and your band, you bet it on you. Now you get to live the life that you've always wanted. You're living off of music and you're touring all the time and you guys have a successful band. Like that's a fucking 1 out of a million thing, dude. I mean, you're not.
Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? And I think that's the lesson here that you guys have and that you have proven so well is that if you bet on yourself and you figure out who you are, what's important to you, and you stand by that, you will be successful.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like there's obviously the addition of like needing to work as hard as you possibly can. I mean, I think it goes without saying that like the only area in which you can outcompete the better drummer or the better guitarist or the better contractor or whatever it is you do is just by working harder. And it's like that or putting in more hours or knowing how to work. I mean, there's always going to be like the kid who's running circles around you. I mean, there always will be. And behind him, another one. Or her, another one. And I mean, like to me, it's always been like, well, I can't do that, but I can play for 4 hours every day, and I can make sure that when I'm going into a session that I'm fucking prepared for it.
Hell yeah. Those are the things that you can control. And if you master those things that you can control, then nothing can stop you at that point.
Yeah, I mean, so much of it is out of your hands. It's not. You don't want to just like try to chase down that chance because it's 1 in a million. I think that you got like just to reiterate what you said, just know what you're good at and chase that down. And also, the more you know what you're good at, it'll become obvious what you're bad at, and you can improve on those things.
Yeah, dude, I love it, man. Honestly, Griffin, I normally ask people to sort of summarize like something at the end, but I think you said everything perfectly. I mean, that last couple things you said, perfect, man. Absolutely perfect. I honestly feel so excited that I got a chance to talk with you. Just to sort of wrap things up, what are you guys working on now? Like, I think you guys were saying that you guys are maybe bouncing songs off of each other and on a tour right now for your latest album. What's going on with your band right now in the near future?
We're going back out January 18th for a month, and then throughout the year in little pockets. And it's always kind of the same cycle. It's like get on tour, work the record, and while working the record, prepare to make the next one. And we've been fortunate to be able to do that. And I'm hoping, and it's looking like it'll just be the same thing. We have a good amount of touring coming up, and then I feel like probably right around the end of that touring, we'll be ready and to make another record. Hopefully, get into the studio, and if with any luck, just keep doing it all again.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Griffin. I know that I definitely did. I say this at the end of almost every episode. I'm always learning. And after this conversation, I definitely want to go back to the drawing board on a lot of the things that I do personally and my approach to music, essentially. If there's anything that I'd like for you guys to take away from this conversation is really the concept of figuring who you are and what's important to you. There's a million things that we could all do, and I'm a very big supporter of shooting for the stars and going after what you want. But honestly, I want to make sure that all you guys, the fans of this show, and maybe you guys who are brand new to the show, I want you guys to really spend some time understanding what's important to you, because ultimately that's what's going to dictate what you end up doing with your career. Some of the most legendary people that you guys probably admire, a lot of your role models most likely went through the exact same process of figuring out who they were. And once they did, they stood for something. And that's what made them legendary. And that's what I want for all of you guys in all your music endeavors, all the time that you guys go to auditions, that you guys start bands, that you guys put yourself out there. I want you guys to definitely consider spending some time thinking about what it is that's important to you. For me, I find it that when I get lost or when I don't know what to do next, revisiting what's important to me tends to help me get back on track to what I need to be doing. And maybe this is something that you've heard before. Maybe it sounds a little bit cheesy, but you know what? Cheesy things tend to be true. And so if I can inspire you to continue bettering yourself and continue pursuing your dreams and what makes you happy, then I know I did my job. Definitely check out Dawes. They're definitely one of my favorite bands right now, and I'm excited to hear a lot of that new music that they're going to start working on this year. I'm sure that it's going to be amazing. And hey, if you enjoyed this interview, definitely consider checking out some of the other ones that I have, and also consider subscribing to the podcast. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, featured on Anchor FM. Anywhere that you guys listen to podcasts, my show is on there. And I do this as much as I possibly can. I talk to the coolest musicians because at the end of the day, my goal is to explore as many mindsets as I possibly can so that you guys can have so many points of reference, so that you guys can see how many different people have achieved their success through many different paths. But at the end of the day, always do you. Always do what's important to you, and I guarantee you that you will find success.